Hey there, brothers and sisters. Timothy here, and welcome to the Rediscover Human podcast, or as it might be renamed now, the Rediscover podcast. Simplified. It's been a while since I've done this, been a few months. It's been quite a heavy winter. I've got a lot going on in my life. I'm still in between houses, although I'm coming to you from a new office space in a different house at the moment. Had relationship stuff going off, a lot of business stuff going off as well, working hard with that, and some processing, some emotional stuff that I'm been working through, plenty more to do, but yeah, I've just had a bit of a break. It's not been a priority, and it takes a lot of, I feel like I want to be on my A game almost when I do these, but at the same time, I've got to let that go, so it was just enough of me to feel ready to come back and do another episode. I feel, spring is coming out. It's nice and warm. I've got a little bit settled into my new house, and with some of my business stuff, I've managed to, launch some things that you might have seen. So yeah, in the right place now to at least give this a go. It's not going to be perfect, but we're back to try. And I know you guys probably don't want it to be, need it to be perfect or anything. You may just be happy to stop something to listen to for an hour every week once again. Hopefully we can get some consistency going. But we'll start with this one. So in this episode, I want to talk a brief bit about, you might see the new thumbnail or YouTube display image or whatever of the new brand and the new logo. So talk a brief bit about that, my vision with that, and then we'll talk about one of the themes that I want this Rediscover to cover, and that's introspection. And then maybe I'll talk a little bit about other things that I'm up to at the end, so sort of 3 parts. But yeah, grateful to be back, grateful to have you guys listening to my voice, and taking the time out of your day to listen to this part of the internet, to be here with me. So, as I just said, you might have seen the Rediscover. As me and Josh, we started the podcast as the Rediscover Human podcast, and we both moved to separate places. I'm grateful he allowed me to continue to call it Rediscover Human podcast, but I know he wanted to use the Rediscover Human name for some of his business slogans and things like that. And he had the Rediscover Human handle on Instagram. So I wanted to come up with something that kept the same theme, but that wasn't too overlapping with what he's doing. And so stripped away the vowels, and we end up with Rediscover. Now, if you've seen on the Instagram, it's still rediscover.hmn, because I couldn't get the RDSCVR IG. Someone else has it with about 13 followers, and they don't reply. I've tried to message him to see if he could kindly give it to me, but alas, we don't have that. But anyway, the brand's Rediscover, the YouTube channel is Rediscover, the podcast is Rediscover, and we can, give and take the human as and when it seems appropriate. But yeah, simplifying. My friend Ryan helped me with the branding. I came up with the theme for the logo, and we went back and forth for several months to get it right. Took some work. We're very happy with where it's at, and what it represents. And I just like that it's, I guess my current business was Way of the Rope, and then I just released a foot course, The Outside Edge. But I wanted something to be an umbrella to that, sort of a parent that overarches that. And with the Instagram, the page that I enjoyed using the most in the last few years was my Tim Moves page, which I sort of started just around the time I came out of veganism, and I started eating animal products, and my body started feeling a bit better at that time, and I started to train again. I got into CrossFit, and I just wanted, and I was doing other stuff as well. I wanted a outlet, because my main Instagram account, the Human Timothy one, I wanted to keep that for more nature appreciation and less physical expressive posts, and I just wanted that outlet. I was rock climbing and things as well, and so I made that account because that's sort of my big passions is movement with the body, and just that exploration and the weird stuff that I get up to, and the practices, the different biomechanical practices that I explore. I wanted an outlet for that, so that was where the Tim Move page came about. And then with this podcast and the sort of low-key buzz, it's not about the numbers, but the people that I get messages from that seem to appreciate this podcast. I can tell that there's something worth me continuing to commit to, and so that seemed like that could be a good theme. The Rediscover Human is what I'm about. It's more than just biomechanics. It's more than just nature appreciation. It's soul exploration, spirituality. Nutrition obviously comes into that a bit as well, as that whole journey that spirals around and around. As well as the Eastern practices that I'm sort of exploring more recently as well, that I find absolutely fascinating, and just looking at things with a whole different approach that they seem to have come at it from for thousands of years, and starting to understand that more and more every week. That's exciting as well. And so coming up with something that could be an umbrella to all of this stuff, that wasn't just me moving, that allows me to post other things, the more spiritual side of my exploring, and as well as the biomechanics, as well as keep the podcast going and have discussions on here, and maybe get some guests in and talk about each of the different subjects that I'm passionate about with those guests that I find value in their opinion. So that's how we are at this. So it's spelt 6 letters, RDSCVR, pronounced Rediscover. I've got RDSCVR.com, which is always nice when you can get a 6-letter URL for £11 or whatever on GoDaddy. So that's how we've got to the Rediscover. I sort of wrote a mission statement. I wanted to write something to encompass what this is that I'm about, essentially. And so it's only a few sentences. I'll just read that, share that with you guys. I believe that we, the human race, are living far from our true potential and the original intention we were designed for by our Creator. My aim is to highlight and share methods I find value in, to assist you on your journey of healing and self-cultivation, so that we may start to truly discover or rediscover what it really means to be human. I am a seeker. I feel I find value in things I find things that I find valuable for other humans that I want to share, and things that I want to highlight. Sorry, that was the end of the mission statement. And then I moved on to the next. I've got some notes that I'm reading from, and I didn't clearly end it. I'll go back to that. Yeah, so essentially, I feel that I am a seeker, and that I do a lot of exploration, and I find value in certain things, or the things that I do find value in, I want to be able to share, and I want to sort of just be a highlighter to other people, to other people that are on this journey as well, to the people that are also seeking, to the people that may have a certain bit of trust in me, or a certain bit of just intrigue in what I'm into. I want to hear what I have to say about it. They value my perspective, whether they agree or not. They're just here to value it. So as Rediscover, that's sort of my plan, is just to have it be a place for me to highlight, methods, theories, philosophies, teachings, practices for other people to come to, and I can share my understanding, my perspective on those things as clearly as I can, so other people can then discern for themselves and choose whether to apply or practice or whatever they want to do. And as I've manifested a career where I've had a lot of free time in my adult years, I feel like something I'm good at that is being able to dive into something, quickly go to the depth of it as much as you can. Obviously, some things obviously need years, but as much as I can within a short space, get the maximum out of it in that time from my own understanding, and then either carry on with it or move on to something else. And that's just something I don't see many people doing. Other people maybe don't value that. Other people maybe don't have the time for it. I do see a lot of people. I guess maybe I'm too far. I could be too far the other way, but there's a lot of people get stuck in one practice, and they sometimes can't see the forest for the trees with it. And then it's maybe years before they let it go after it's not stopped serving them in a way. And so I'm kind of the other end of that spectrum, where I'll get into something quickly, maximize what I can kind of get from it or glean from it, and then move on to something else. And it's sort of that Bruce Lee adage of, takes what works and leave what doesn't. And because of the free time, because of my passion, because of the way I just function, that's how I work. And so, you can come to me if you're into similar things, and I may have a perspective on something that you're into, or that you've been into, or that you're thinking of getting into. That could be useful. And so I just wanted a platform to be able to do that. And that's what we're here doing at Rediscover. And so there's 3 key principles or principal practices that I've identified that I use to develop as a human at the moment, that I'll get into with the podcast. And the first one being introspection, which is sort of what this logo you can see, you might recognize that can represent introspection. If you know what introspection means, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit in this podcast. The second principal practice is cultivation, which you may know from Eastern words, from sort of Qigong is a practice of cultivating Qi. But also beyond that, we mean sort of self-cultivation, cultivation of self, the development of who you are, you as a person, growing, towards virtuous, to be the more virtuous human, to be a kinder, more loving person. And all of these principles kind of feed each other. So you can use introspection for self-cultivation. That's going to help you cultivate yourself and develop yourself. And then the third principle being creation. I believe that, we are made somewhat in our Father's image, the one that created us, so we can create as well. And that can mean we can create another human in the sense that through biology, or we can create things. We can create technology, create food recipes. We can create practices, physical practices, create games, create all sorts, create businesses. And so that, in the sense that through creating things, we put ourselves out there in the universe, at the eyes of others, at the in the winds of the galactic weather, when we create and when we do put our time and energy into cultivating something, creating something, that's a chance for us to get feedback from the universe, for us to serve, a higher purpose, serve a greater good, or to serve our own selfish desires and do things that way. And so through creating, if we use, this is kind of a recycle logo where it comes back. If we introspect, which as I say, we're going to talk about, to recognize, to learn more about ourselves and who we are. We cultivate to develop ourselves, and then with the self that we've developed, we use that with, the passions that are innate within us as a person, each of us, to create something, bring it into this world. Like I say, that can be a business, a practice, a coaching regimen or something, and then see the results from that, see what the universe has to show us about our creation, see what we feel about our creation, see what we feel we could do better if we were to do it again, or to continue to develop, see if we are still passionate after we've created about that subject or whatever. And then we can go back to, so we introspect about our creation. And so this is sort of, like I say, the three principal practices that I've identified that I focus on to keep myself growing and developing as a human, and growing in the direction that I want to grow in, that I want to become. I want to be more loving and help cultivate that into this world, and be the change you want to see. So create things in the world that can help towards the world that I want to live in and exist in and be a part of. So, and I think for each of those other two, cultivation and creation, I'll talk about those in future. But for this podcast, we'll focus on introspection shortly. So the logo, which you may see on your screen right now on Spotify or YouTube, however you're listening to this, you can see the hood over the eyes, and this for me does represent a looking inwards, a self-reflection. You could have the eyes closed, sort of meditative in a sense, but it's this inwards looking. There's a North Star over his head, which represents sort of a fixed point, the physical fixed point that all humans have looked to in the past to guide their way. Our ancestors sailing in the oceans used the North Star, knowing that it was fixed. They could sail around and use it as a natural compass. And then also metaphorically what this represents, which is sort of the ultimate dream or goal that each of us carry. And for many people that could be a business venture, like they want to make X amount of money. For someone it could be health. People could have, I guess, maybe it shouldn't be a North Star, but it's not here to judge. This is just what each of us has. It could be to run, to finish a Ironman or something. That could be someone's North Star, like the ultimate dream. It could be, for me, I'd say something more, they say dream big, aim for the stars, something like heaven on earth. I think that's a good North Star for each of us to hold if we feel inclined that way. Sort of celestial ambitions, either while we're on earth or at some point in the future. That's definitely a North Star. And so if we hold that North Star that we have in our mind, in our day-to-day, that should guide the decisions we make each day. And we can see when we're on track or when we're off track a bit clearer. So I probably need to tier some North Stars, because heaven on earth is quite it's quite a weighty one, and maybe I need to work on some steps towards that. But still, the North Star, I like what it represents. As you can see, there's a sort of a question mark around introspective man's collar, and this is the encouragement to always ask questions and also to stay open to unexpected answers and truths that we may uncover. And that's to continue to ask questions about things we think we know the answer to already. So we're turning over rocks, maybe rocks that society has said, there's no point looking under that rock. We've already given you the answer for that. Hang on a minute. I want to ask that question myself as a sovereign adult who can think rationally and logically. Let me ask that question once again, and let me search for my own answers to that question that you've just given me the answers for without showing me the working, so to speak. And then also we've got a gentle smile on his face, which shows our humble hopes for the future. It's just a very small upturned mouth, but nonetheless, a serene look on his face. And so on that As I said, the hood over the eyes represents introspection. Today's talk, I want to talk a little bit about introspection. Some of you may have seen I did an Instagram post on this recently. So some of the same notes that I wrote for that post, but wanted to share in podcast format. So introspection, a sort of reflective look inwards. On this path of healing and self-cultivation, I believe that introspection is one of the most valuable tools that we can start to hone. Now, I think we're all, aware of self-reflection and know thyself and these kind of adages. Introspection is just a word that kind of really sums that up for me. It was actually only really started to stick in the last year or so that this kind of word is, we're looking for tools for healing, and there's a lot of different practices out there. And I just don't think introspection gets enough highlighting or traction as the power that it can have, but it's also can be quite a difficult one to work on, and there's not many, we're not taught it in school or anywhere. You can kind of maybe get some introspection with the help of a therapist or something like that. But then how can you use introspection in the best way for actual growth and actual healing at a deep root soul level? So I don't claim to be an expert on this subject, but I recognize how, massive this practice has been for me so far since starting to implement it just a little bit, and how the potential it has going forward, because it really is all about knowing yourself at a soul level, knowing the true condition of your soul, knowing the truth about yourself, all your lovingness, but also all your unlovingness, all my unloving traits that are just there that I'm maybe been ignorant to and blind to. This is coming to terms, this is coming to face that, and then trying to work out the root of that. Why is that? Why do I act unlovingly when that circumstance arises in that way, when many other people don't act unlovingly under that circumstance? What is it in me that's there, that's, and why is it there? And how can I work to remove that, not just suppress or act differently, even though at a soul level I want to act unlovingly under this scenario? How can I actually change that at the real root level so that my innate first reaction is a loving one and not the unloving one? So firstly, this is something that we are getting opportunities every single day to work on, to introspect. So we can reflect on everyday interactions that we're having. So these can be in relationships with our partners, with our friends, with our families. This can be in business interactions. This can be in emails or phone calls you get with maybe people that you're sort of doing businesses with, buying supplies from, or more prominently, you get it from customers, which can go either way, and we can talk about. But let's dive into that a little bit. You can get people that are sort of triggering to you in angry, negative way, that they're emailing you angry about some part of your business, or you can get the overly keen, eager to please, very happy but wishy-washy clients as well. And on all sides of this is interactions that we can reflect on and learn how we maybe treat different people differently depending on how they're treating us and things like this. And there's certain inconsistencies with ourselves. And then there's also the third type I'd identify in everyday interactions is with strangers. And this can be most commonly, I'd say, driving, because for some reason when there's metal between you, you can feel like you can treat other humans, and this is things I've identified in myself as well, with more aggression or disconnection to them, because there's two pieces of metal between you and the other person in their car. In supermarkets, in lines at the bank, dealing with people that are assisting you in shops, waitresses and waiters, things like this. So that these are everyday interactions that we can reflect on afterwards, at the end of the day, or after the incident. And if we tune into fluctuations of our emotions with these circumstances, then we can observe both. There's two things really: the triggers, so that'll be when we're close to an emotional wound, and then two, addictions, and that's things that we're using to cover up, resist, suppress, or distract from our emotional wounds. So the triggers is the more obvious circumstance. So if you notice a jump in your emotion in the negative direction, so you suddenly get angry or aggressive, or you feel flustered or frustrated, this could be, like I say, from a stranger. How quickly can it happen in a car? If you get a bit of road rage, or someone pushed in front of you in a line at the supermarket, even if someone does a chat and cut, and you see them doing the chat and cut, they pretend to talk to their friend, and then they're secretly trying to cut in. That's the trigger. Or you get a angry email, or a business associate, they're up their prices or something. Recently the post office has upped the cost of shipping. If this was to trigger me, and I'd be frustrated, or some negative emotion would suddenly flare up upon learning this new news or whatever's happened, then I know that I'm close to a wound. And if, I guess we might focus more on the triggers, because addictions are the things we use to cover up with this. So something might happen, and then you might, want to eat a sugary treat, and that will help to calm you down or soothe it. And that's the tool that you're using to trigger up. So you can recognize if you have addictive behavior, and then with addictions, that's just the physical stuff that I mentioned there. It goes much deeper into emotional, which I'm not really qualified. Who is qualified to talk? Well, there are people, but they can get into a whole deeper topic. And I just want to kind of touch on introspection to help give people my understanding of where it is at, and maybe help them to start to get an introspective practice if they can. And so these triggers, if you notice in the day, if your emotions have suddenly fluctuated at these instances, you know that you're close to an emotional wound. And this might be an instance where someone else, like I say, might have the exact same scenario happen to them, and they're not triggered by it at all. And so this is where there's a wound, as we'll get into, that's from your childhood to do with that scenario. But anyway, let's go on to the definition of introspection. This is from Wikipedia. Introspection is the examination of one's own conscious thoughts and feelings. In psychology, the process of introspection relies on the observation of one's mental state, while in a spiritual context, it may refer to the examination of one's soul. So my sort of take on that, you've got the two angles there. You've got the psychological one is looking at your mental state, and then in spirituality, it's saying we're looking at one's own soul. And I think because it's not something we're necessarily taught in school, it's not seen as a physical science, that we think that it's maybe harder to understand, to examine the soul. We think it's something more ethereal and harder we can't touch it. So, how can it be a definite thing that's there, that's work, we can't work with it as easily, or, is it possible to even work with it? And so this is what I'm come to learn and to recognize, that it's totally, the point is that if we can understand things at a soul level and work at the soul level, then that's how we can actually truly make change in our lives and truly start to heal. And so I believe our mental state, as it's said in psychology, as I've said in previous podcasts, is a product of our emotional state anyway. Plus, I think there's some chemistry involved. So if you're, drinking coffees regularly, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, that's going to affect your mental state. On top of the reason for doing that stuff in the first place is emotional, avoidance of emotions that we feel we need to stimulate or to numb out of, or push through with chemistry. So plus our physical state. So if you're got sickness or illness and your body is really uncomfortable or tight or painful, that's going to affect your mental state as well. It's like if you're wearing a really tight shoe all day, when you take it off, you feel much more relieved to take it off. So that low level stimulus of tightness is an effect on the mental state. So, and I think that's one thing, maybe when we die and you let go of the body, there is a certain maybe release potential, but there's obviously still, that's just from the physical. There's still, the emotional state is still going to remain the same and still needs to be worked through. And so when we focus on, at the soul level, on the, as it said, in the spiritual context rather than the psychological of the mental state, we focus on the soul. This is where we're working. We're talking about emotions, and this is where we're working closer to the root issue. And so, to understand that, when we are getting these interactions in our days from our partners, our friends and family, from business associates and customers, from strangers in the shop and in the street, these are chances. These are our own personal laws of attractions bringing us these events in order to help trigger things that are unprocessed, the emotions that are unprocessed, that are there in our soul, that are, if we think of the soul, and you can imagine it as, a nice, perfect sphere or something, there are wounds in our soul. If we weren't triggered by something, then there's not a wound in that scenario and in that related to that kind of subject or topic. To it could be to do with money, or to do with the opposite gender treating you a certain way, or to do with being trusted or something. So every day we're getting these miniature law of attractions, and divine truth calls it God's messenger of truth. The law of attraction is God's messenger of truth, bringing you things. It's not just the New Age law of attraction bringing us thinking about money and getting money. It's far, far more than that, and far more accurate than that, and it's deeper than that. It works. I remember, I think it was Greg Braden talks about emotions being the magnet that either pulls or pushes your law of attraction. And that totally makes sense as well. And so God's messenger of truth is bringing us these everyday instances to teach us about ourselves, to help us to identify where the injuries are, where the emotional injuries lie, the wounds that are in our soul, where they are. And the reason they're there is from our childhood, mainly from between conception to about 7 years old. This is what I've learned. This is what makes total sense from, I don't need to validate why I think my opinions counts here, I guess, but years of seeking and searching and researching and trying to understand myself and trying to heal, and all these different spiritual rabbit holes. When I came across this and started to implement this and started to study and understand this, it's very logical, fairly easy to understand, simple, also hard to implement, takes some real practice, but it's feels really human. It feels really not this linearized sort of societal design of how to do things. It's very, I don't know how to put it. It takes all elements of your being to work around this, because it's not just, you can't just intellectualize this process. It's takes some heart involvement. It takes your mind, but it takes knowing your emotions and starting to learn to recognize your emotions and to know each day, notice the fluctuations within them. So that's what you can do when you get triggered, is to take a second to recognize what has triggered you, maybe to write it down. What is the subject around, that has set you off? And there will be some injury from childhood, from the way a parent or guardian treated us, to do with that same subject, or some accident happened around that subject, and we didn't fully process it. We didn't fully express the emotion at that time because a parent or guardian didn't want us to throw a tantrum in the supermarket, and so they quickly bought us the sweet that stopped us, crying or something that we were after, rather than allow us to express the emotion fully. They gave in maybe to our addiction, or they didn't like the emotions that it brought up for them to see us feeling such a way, because they were suppressing their emotions. So they did all they could to, put the TV on to stop us expressing ours. And so therefore it became bottled up and stored within our soul. And it's there playing out in everyday life, God's messenger of truth, bringing us these instances to highlight to us what's there that needs to be worked on. So as an example, for me, I remember when I was maybe year 2, so what's that? No, I would have been year 3 or 4. So maybe 7 or 8 or 9, 7 or 8, I think. And I was going to buy some Bauer roller skates from a teacher at school. And there were Bauer's like the 4-wheeled, not the inline ones, but like the 4-wheeled ones for 50p. And I remember my mum dropped me off at school, and I'd asked my mum, and she said, yeah, my mum would rarely give me money for things. Like I got my bit of pocket money, but if I wanted things, they wouldn't really buy them. I had to save up for myself. But in this instance, she actually said she'd give me the 50p to buy these roller skates from the teacher. So I was so excited. And I went to school the next morning, and went there early. My mum dropped me off and said, hope you get it. Gave me the 50p, and I walked to the teacher's office, and I stood outside the door, and the door, there was like a door, and it went up the stairs, and then there was the teacher's office room was at the top of the stairs, and I thought I'd wait outside for the teacher. I wouldn't just go in there. And this other kid came past me, went straight up the stairs, and went and bought the skates from the teacher, because I think the teacher must have said, first person here tomorrow can get them. And man, it hurt that my attempt to be polite was then thwarted by someone else who walked straight in, and maybe I was overly polite or something. It hurt that my mum had, said, wished to me that I get the skates. I think, I don't fully remember with full clarity because I was so young, but I think I must have maybe been asked to be dropped off. I think I used to walk to school, so maybe she dropped me off so that I could get there early in time to get it. But I was just so upset, and I just remember this real pain, deep pain in my soul, that the thing I really wanted, that I was there and I was polite I've felt that I was polite to wait ended up being, what's the opposite of rewarded? Punished for my politeness or whatever. And I don't remember like bottling my emotions, and maybe this isn't an incident that caused a wound, but maybe it was a law of attraction at that age because of something earlier that happened in my childhood, even before that. But since then, I get this feeling if I want something, that I really want it, and I will do whatever I can to make it happen. I think some of us can maybe relate to that, and some of us don't have that at all. Some of us are easy to let things go, and yeah, if it's meant to be, I'll get it, and if not, and I've had that with, certain trying to rent an apartment or something, and I just offer to pay. I'll just pay 6 months up front because I want it, rather than get put in this, collective group of other people that might rent it and pay monthly or something. I'll just do what I can to make. If I really want it, I'm going to make sure it happens at all costs. I think I really feel like that wound relates to that instant when I was a younger child, and like I say, if it happens from conception to 7, most of these wounds get put there, and that was after 7. Then maybe that was put from something earlier, but I feel like that maybe deepened the wound within me. And yeah, maybe I didn't feel like fully expressing my emotions at that age as well. But that's one of the things when these incidents happen, because I don't think I didn't act aggressively when that happened to me. I don't think I was like angry at anyone. I just felt really sad. But as we get older, or some point, we learn to act aggressively or angrily, rather than just to feel the sadness that's inside. And this is sort of a cover-up emotion. It's a defense to protect the wound, that something is close to touching the wound, and we just, no, get away. It's you. It's your fault. It's your fault I feel pain right now. But it can't be. We can't feel pain if the wound isn't there in the first place. So it's just identification. So it's trying to change our perspective when we do have these daily interactions that seem negative or challenging, to focus on your own part in the whole thing. Try to recognize that there's a reason this scenario is happening to you right now, and to take 24 hours to reply to that email if you need to. Take 24 hours to reply to that, direct message that triggered you on Instagram. The number of times I've not taken 24 hours, and then I look back the next day and I'm like, I read that so differently from how they actually meant it because of my own injury, and I've responded in an injured way, and then I just come across looking like overly dramatic or something like that. And these are all these lessons. It's like, if I would have just took a day or slept on it, sleep on it is great advice many times. I would have seen it differently and recognized, wow, I wanted to pounce on that, and actually they didn't mean it that way. Or even if they meant it that way, it's not right. It's not my, for me to respond equally unlovingly or more unlovingly is not a solution here. Isn't going to help us to grow. And so this is where introspection comes in, because if we can recognize, like I say, the blood boiling, the seeing red, the quickening of the heart, the quick change of emotions, then there's something there that we can start to work on. And it can be a long process, and it can take some work, but it's a process, and it's in the right direction. If we truly want to change, rather than bringing more chaos to the world, acting more unlovingly, and this word sin, to sin, which divine truth define as to miss the mark of love. How often do we miss the mark of love? When we're triggered. So we, sin. So we add more weight to the soul, to our own soul. And it's just at some point you become tired, you just want to change it. You just don't want to continue, hurt people. You don't want to continue that cycle. And you just recognize how it's not helping anything. And you eventually become sensitive to recognize that when you are unloving, that there is a cost almost instantly to you that you feel. And this is something that I feel like I become more and more sensitive to when I am unloving to someone else. Even in subtle ways that you would never have deemed unloving, a few years ago, or I wouldn't have deemed as unloving. Or I feel the weight of it instantly, or more instantly, or I recognize it, an hour or so later. I'm like, man, I've been feeling a certain way, and I acted that way. Then, yeah, maybe I need to just take a second before I react next time, And that's one thing, and this is kind of another subject, but that's why I absolutely love the Divine Truth teaching, because it ties in so much. It really, it paints a much clearer picture. That's why I think it's X on the map for the spirituality or the healing at the soul level, at the root level. There's a difference between will and willpower. And this was a huge light bulb when I heard Mary explain this, and was like, wow, yeah. Your will, and this is my own, I'm going to paraphrase here, and I'm not the teacher of this, but this is just, I'm going to share my understanding of where it currently lies with this. It might be, slightly off, but I'll do my best. Your will is your natural desire or your natural response to a scenario. That's just what your soul wants to do in that instance. Willpower is what we use when we try to fight the natural response to force the better response or the more loving response. So if someone challenges me and triggers me to want to write an aggressive response or something like that, I can then either react and write the angry response back, and that will be will. My will is to do that. That's my automatic reaction. I could use willpower to take 24 hours, write a more loving response. Now, I would love to just be able to have that loving response be the automatic reaction from my heart, from my soul, to recognize that other person, if they're being unloving to me, then that comes from an injury in them, maybe even be able to have an understanding of that, and to respond nurturingly, humbly, not arrogantly, but to assist, or, in some way, or to just have a neutral response. I'd love that to come from will. I would love that to be my natural, innate, or the soul's response from will, and not have to use willpower to do that. And it seems like the way to change that, to move to be loving and I do believe this is, when I use the word innate, this is where I mean it more here. I believe we are naturally, innately designed to be loving people, beings. And this is what I talk about when I say in the mission statement for Rediscover, it's that the Creator designed us to be a certain way that we're far from right now. I believe it's our will to be loving, our innate will to be loving, and that because of these injuries, that societally we've learnt to suppress emotions, and so therefore they're bottled and stuck in our soul. Therefore, they're wounds that can continue to be triggered. If we can go through the trigger, humbly express the emotion at the root level, rather than the cover-up, to full expression, to the release of it, then that will change our reaction on the matter from the unloving one to the loving one, so that our will becomes loving, rather than having to use willpower to be loving, which have done, and I am doing, and continuing to do. And I know many, and this is so draining. And if you hear me, you hear me, right? How draining is it to try to have to use willpower to be a nice person all the time? And that's something that my friend Bex has identified for me, is I have this nice guy facade. And she's saying that, Tim, that must be so draining. Like when you're able to let that go and move through that, you're going to feel a lot better. And that's it. That's what this is, using willpower to try to be what I think is a definition of loving and act that way, rather than there's a child in me that knows how to do that without any effort. And so I just love that, understanding that the difference between will and willpower, and that this is the path to letting go of willpower, to letting go of effort, to help it so that our will, our pure desire is always to be loving to ourselves and to others in every incident, in every moment that may have triggered us in the past and may trigger many people, that it won't trigger us in the same way. But this is what I wanted to share, really, is that is introspection is a tool that can help us to start to identify these moments where we're using willpower to do something over will. And I don't want to teach this incorrectly or claim to be an expert of this, so I will have to send you to the people I do consider experts. But hopefully what I've shared can just give you a little inkling to either you are already listening to that stuff or to go and listen to that stuff. And that is the Divine Truth Teachings. And this is where trying to bottle up, ignore, meditate, and I don't mean that in every instance, just in some instances, the way people can use meditation. Stoicistically suppress, which I see Stoicism is getting quite a big following these days, and something I glanced upon, but there was something in it is still not quite the way God designed us to be human. That's more of a suppression, it seems like, with Stoicism, where you don't react positively or negatively to any instance, almost. That's kind of a suppression of emotions. Or positively affirming ourselves with positive affirmations to try and get out of negative thinking and these kind of methods. You can't use these to get out of unprocessed, unhealed negative emotions when they're stored in the soul. It's not possible. And I've tried that, and I'm sure many of us have tried many of these methods. No real change happens when we do that. Our will to do the unloving thing is still there. We can just use more willpower to not do it. We can just recognize that it's not loving and use more willpower, but to make the actual change where suddenly our deep desire is a different reaction to the same scenario. You can't use those methods. You have to go through the emotion to get there, through the real root emotion. And doing those methods can lead to more problems if you just bottle up or medicate or stoicistically suppress, positively affirm. That can lead to more problems and greater negative laws of attraction in the future. So something will escalate and we'll ignore it, or we'll say, no, that's fine, or we'll control the environment even more and control the environment even more, which is something I've been good at, is controlling my environment, until a bigger health problem. You've got a certain cancer, or an accident happens, like a big car crash or something, or a painful breakup that comes out of nowhere. The more we try to suppress these unprocessed emotions, the greater a law of attraction will become, in order to trigger it out of us, in order to bring it back to the surface to be expressed, because it's a messenger of truth to help us. It's what our soul wants. It's what our soul needs to heal and grow. So we've got this opportunity many times a day to start to identify where these wounds are and how to work our way through them and back or towards the potential that we were designed for. Not the lies that we have been fed about who humans are, about who we are, or the ignorance that's plagued society. We're so far from it, and this growth of meta and technological advancements which completely neglect the environment or the human spirit. It's going to lead to bigger laws of attraction for the collective humanity. And so, for me, it's been helpful to have people around me that understand this as well. And it's not just happened. I've had to, lean in this direction, but I have a few friends who also study divine truth who have helped me a lot. My partner, Haley, who studied it, or has listened to quite a bit of it as well, and has discussions with me and has discussions with a few other people who've been over to Australia and learned. I've been to the assistance groups. She's been very helpful as well for us to reflect and talk about instances with each other and with no judgment, and just try to really get to the root of the issues. And it's hard because there are wounds being triggered, and it's a challenge, and it's definitely not always, well, it's not fun and it's not pretty, but it's afterwards you can feel that it's the most valuable work that you could be doing. You could use a therapist. Hopefully the therapist kind of understands that the aim is to get to the root emotions and to express them, not just to, because here's another thing, we can just try to understand it. Oh, I understand my mother was just injured, so therefore she treated me like that way, so I forgive my mother. And yeah, but rather than feeling the pain of the unloving way we were treated, that's what needs to happen, rather than just to understand intellectually, oh, they did that because of that, okay, therefore I'm healed now. It doesn't work like that without the emotions being felt. There's no healing if there's no feeling. And that took a while for me to really grasp that, and maybe I've not fully grasped it, to be honest, but I think I understand it more now than I used to. So it's sort of it can be looked at as a little more of an Eastern practice. It's so interesting, and I've been studying a lot of Eastern stuff on and off for years, but then coming back to it, and how the difference in the Eastern religions and the Western religions, whereas Western is kind of, we're dependent on God, and Jesus died on the cross for our sins, so therefore we don't kind of have to do as much, and we'll just try and be a nice person in society. Whereas Eastern is very much self-responsibility and is a bit more self-reflective and going inwards. And I just think that there's kind of falsehoods on all sides, and there's beautiful truths on all sides. So, the Western religious kind of working with God, praying to God and for guidance and help, especially with this stuff, is of great value. And the Eastern stuff of introspection and reflecting on your own interactions with the day, with the people, with each person, how you played your part in things rather than blaming other people constantly. It's a bit more introspective and compassionate. And I think it's nice to study both and to recognize that the Western is a little more external focused and the Eastern is a little more internal focused, and it's trying to use, like I said previously, the divine truth model has given me, my spirituality, a backbone, a spine, so to speak, or a reference point to bring all of the learnings and teachings and spiritual teachings and religious teachings to see what sticks and to see what doesn't. And then it really just given me much more clarity and like a third eye perspective almost. Not if that sounds cheesy or not, but it feels like it on these other teachings, so I can understand what works and why it works and what doesn't work and why to let that go, and to not get too lost in the Taoist philosophies where there's not much talk of emotions. But there is still some good lessons within those teachings, But nothing's, like I say, it seems to be as good as the DT stuff. And so for further guidance, I would definitely recommend check out, if you haven't already, the Divine Truth on YouTube. Their Law of Cause and Effect video is a good place to start if you want to just one video, Law of Cause and Effect, Divine Truth on YouTube. Or, as I've said before, again, their Education in Love series really is X marks the spot for this kind of stuff. And there's Assistance Group 1 and 2, which was kind of the first one, and then they went into Education in Love, was kind of on from that. And I think the Assistance Group 1 or 2 is absolutely the best place to start, or you can go in at Education in Love. It's a lot of hours. You listen while you're on a long drive or while you're doing some Largian stretching. But it's really like, I've just skimmed the surface with what I've shared here today. That's where you can really, there is bits of homework and stuff you can do within those teachings for this and on their website as well. So yeah, that's some soul mechanics, some introspection, my take on it. So as this podcast is I want it to be also biomechanics, not just the soul mechanics, but the biomechanics and the spirit mechanics, which spirit mechanics is kind of the books I'm into, which is the afterlife stuff. That stuff is fascinating. But biomechanics as well, I love my passion of the body and mathematics combined. I did release recently my foot course, The Outside Edge, on rediscover.com, RDSCVR.com. You can access it for free. I hate to spam people with stuff, so many of you may have heard this already, but yeah, you can access it as a pay what you feel model. So you can either pay what you feel up front, or you can try it out for free, and then if you get some value in it, you want to come back and support me, that is greatly appreciated. I put a lot into that course. I think I actually am due to do a whole podcast on that, because there's so much that I can't explain in an Instagram post or like a 2-minute YouTube video. So I think I actually want to do a whole episode on diving into all 4 elements: earth, water, air, fire, each of those, the Largian, the fascia, the Paida, and the balance elements. Also, you may have seen I launched a retreat, my first ever retreat, where I want to get into a lot of the physical practices, some hiking, some swimming, wild swimming, rope rolling, qigong. That's sold out for September, but I'm looking to either get one extra room for that time for September, or get another date in July. I may be lucky enough to get another date in July. I'm aiming for July. There will be limited spaces once again, but if you're interested, let me know and I will just add you to a waiting list, and you'll be the first to know if I add another room or if I get that other date. So just drop me a DM wherever if you want to come. That's going to be in the Lake District. Absolute favourite place in the UK. So it should be, I'm quite excited, and I will try to over-deliver. My rope 8-week course, I've finally turned it into PDF version and broke it into 3 parts: spine, arms, and footwork. So those that didn't want to get the 8-week course as the full 8 weeks, they maybe just wanted to do the footwork. They've done the other stuff. The footwork can be accessed individually. Again, pay what you feel basis. I did set a minimum cap on that. I'm still challenged to do completely free for all of my services. as an option, especially online. I feel like if someone was buying it from me in person, like they were buying a CD or a book from me in person, and you offered pay what you feel, not many would pay zero. But online, it's so easy for people to pay zero. So due to that's just an excuse, but I've put the minimum cap as £5 for each of those courses. But you can access the 3 weeks worth of footwork course from rediscover.com. Or the other rope course, if you've not done any of it, it's broken down. You can do it in individual parts. So that's something I may speak about in future podcasts, is business ethics. And those that follow me a little more closely may see how often I'm fluctuating and trying to challenge myself and then stepping away and up and down. I'm up and down with it, but I'm trying to, over time, really set some precedents with my own business and morals and ethics, and pay what you feel. Letting the customer choose the value is one way I try to do that, and that is definitely challenging. But it gives me a chance to face any doubts that I'm not provided for, and challenge what do I actually need to live on. So I think that should actually. It could be useful for people if I shared my intentions and my fears and my motivations with those attempt at different form of business that I'm trying to do. There's an app I'm working on. It's not far from finish, actually. The Rediscover app, which is where the rope course is, where the outside edge is. I want to I've got a shoulder course in development. I may do some WEC methods stuff and some kettlebell and all sorts, but I'd like to create a series of different different programs and put them all in an app where it's in one place, that people don't have to go to Instagram or to these other socials. You can just have a Rediscover app that you can access valuable content for your body, which is my understanding of the Eastern stuff, because I do think some of the Western training, it depends what your goals are. If you want strength and conditioning, get the 5x5 program or something like that. But I'm working on alternate stuff that I think is more aligned with the body's design and natural makeup, that I want to try and program into this app anyway. I also want to lead some more walks, maybe some Qigong, free or again donation basis. But if you're in the Derby area, because I'm currently doing them with Down to Earth, I've got one next weekend on Saturday the 23rd. It is linked on my website if you want to dig around and find that. But I'm going to be leading a hike in the Kinder Scout in the Peak District. It's sort of the commemoration of the right to roam. I think it's the 90th year anniversary of when the owners of the land tried to privatize all the Peak District, and the ramblers all protested and said, we need a right to walk on this land. This is beautiful country that we should be able to walk. And so leading it's a commemoration of that date walk on 23rd of April. But I want to do, if you're listening to this after the fact, I want to start doing more walks in Derby, maybe like a completely barefoot walk from start to finish, maybe a completely silent walk from start to finish. If you are regionally affiliated with me, and that might be interest to you, because obviously I want to know that there's at least like 5 of us doing it or something like that. Drop me a message to let me know, hey, just a heads up, I'm interested in local walks with you, because I'm currently doing it with Down to Earth, but with the launch of Rediscover, I feel like I could keep it all in-house. I still do stuff with them, but just put it on, keep it, make a little community here. So let me know. All right. Well, I've gone on. How long have we gone on for? A little bit. Hopefully this is the first of another chapter, another stint of podcasts. Thank you for taking the time to listen. And yeah, stay tuned for more content on the YouTube. I'm trying to put my time into making valuable stuff for people and to make it accessible as well. So thanks for recognizing. Thanks for being here. Much love. Peace.